Is it recording?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. All right, Karthi. So, how do you think the that lesson went? Like overall, what was the success of the lesson for you?
I think it gave me an idea of which students understood, but I think it was also a little muddy.
Okay. Tell me what that means. Where was it muddy?
I think it was so focused on putting as many possible forms of assessment as I possibly could instead of just worrying about effective ways of assessing.
Okay.
So I wanted to throw a Kahoot in there. I wanted to throw a peer review in there. I wanted to do a engaging assessment. You know what I mean? And I don't think like it was all of it was necessary.
Okay.
Yeah,
so I was going to speak to that as well. Before we go into the assessment part, well, I mean, it kind of goes hand in hand. So I was a little confused as to what exactly you were assessing in that lesson. I didn't know if it was standard mastery. I didn't know if it was, it was more like, where's the summative? Where's the formative? I think I can pick out the summative. That's easy. The peer reviews, the summative, definitely summative. We're using the student work sample. That can be summative, depending on what standard is on that work sample and what standard is being assessed. There was formative in that, it was an engaging lesson and there were certain things that you were walking around to ensure and monitor. But I wasn't quite sure what the end outcome was supposed to be. What was the one piece that you were assessing? There were lots of different assessments that went in there. And so, at the start of your lesson, there were some strategies that you used. You did modeling and reviewing, which is huge. But in your model, it wasn't modeling how to do it wasn't giving them a step-by-step of what you should do and then leaving it at that. It was actually a model and review all in one. And so it ended up that basically the how to do it was already on the board for them because you did it for them. The model for assessing, you should have modeled, I would have liked to see you model just how you wanted them to complete the assessment activity, not necessarily go through every single portion, write down, first you wrote down all of your words. You had somebody time you for 2 minutes and you wrote down as many words as you could in 2 minutes. And so the kids are watching you for 2 minutes. Right. That could have easily, in your planning portion, been done ahead of time. So taking chart paper and writing down something already and not necessarily showing them that this is how you time. They're in 6th grade, so they know how to time. And then, so planning ahead of time with the proper resources, so using your chart paper so that you're not constantly on the projector, because you take some time out to go back and click to this slide and then click to this, and as you're clicking to all the different places, you're writing on the board because you're showing them what to do and how to do it, and then it's just all up there, and there's a whole lot of sensory overload. Okay, there's a lot of visuals, which is great. That's something that we want to see. You're tailoring your instruction to all different types of learners, but now it's over visual. And so if you would have had a piece of chart paper or even written it on the board and having it covered, however you want to do it, but that pre-planning is key because then you don't spend so much time on the modeling. You could have had your function chart underneath the words and had, what you wanted them to write already on there so that it eliminates the time that it takes for you to write it down. And then same thing with the graph, have a piece of graph paper, graph chart paper next to it and say, okay, and in reviewing. Now, how do we plot again? And have them talk about it, but not necessarily doing the plotting because it was all up there for them. And so then, are they really mastering it, or are they looking at your example and going, oh yeah, I can do that, So there was check. Oh, you also used the check for understanding strategy, which I liked. You walked around as they were working in their activity, and you were asking questions to see if they were grasping the concept and if they were mastering standards. And then you went into the peer review. Mm-hmm. So tell me how you partnered the students in with the peer review.
I did. I wanted to make sure that the students that struggle with the skill had someone working with them who have demonstrated mastery in the skill.
Okay.
So they can help out the lower student.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that I noticed is that in the partnerships, the student who doesn't show mastery has a far better chance of showing mastery and having a better grade and more improvement because they're working with somebody who has mastered the standard or who's shown that they can master the standard if you haven't assessed at this point. Mm-hmm. That being said, that higher level student can easily review and evaluate their peer, and they can say, yes, you showed confidence when you did this part, and you struggled in this part, and you asked questions in this part, and you mastered the standard in these 3 ways. But can that lower performing student evaluate their peer in the same way? If they're not grasping the standard, almost always they'll have to go first and then, let their peer review them, and then at best they can use the same language, but do they really understand how they're reviewing their peer? So my suggestion for you there is during class activities, that's awesome, having a mentor, a peer mentor, and grouping them that way when they're doing those types of activities. But if you're going with peer review, you want to you want to pair the people who are at the same ability level so that it's a legit and true peer review. Yeah. Because then that kind of takes away from the summative evaluation of it. Like that's a summative assessment, but is one more accurate than the other.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So when you're doing whole group and when you were doing the review portion of it, and this doesn't necessarily have to be for this specific lesson, but just in general, you ask questions and you say, okay, so in the 2 minutes, I wrote 41 words in the 2 minutes. How many words would I write in 1 minute? And several students called out and they were like, 20.5. And you're like, that's great. And so then you wrote 20.5 down. And then you're like, okay, so then what you're going to do is write 3 and 4 and 5. And so what would it look like at 3? And you, same students, I'm assuming, called out, 61 or whatever it was. For assessment purposes, formative-wise, if you're kind of just, checking for understanding in a whole group setting as well, ask why or how they know. Like, okay, great, and how did you get that? What did you use to get that answer?
And that's digging deeper.
Right. You want to, you don't want them to just recall, like you want them to analyze and be able to say, well, I got it because, you know, if in 2 minutes they gave me 41, then in 1 minute I would have to divide that by 2. I would have to cut that in half, you know, and then by 3, then I multiply that by 3 and get that answer. You know, you want them to dig deeper, and then you'll, you know, that's again, you know, a quick monitor, like, okay, he's definitely got it, she's got it. And then not so much, I think we talked about this before, relying so much on the callback of the students who always answer. Really being intentional about picking out other students to kind of get it out of them, walk them through it, you know, and you're really good at that because you don't make the students feel like, you know, even if they have a master's standard, they don't feel stupid when they're answering questions, you know, and in 6th grade, that's a huge thing. And so being intentional and saying, okay, you know, Jaden, I know that you've worked with so-and-so before, you've worked with Victor before, and he's got it, he's calling out to me. Tell me about something that you and Victor did together. Like, okay, how else can we break it down? And what would that look like? And using that style of teaching so that he gets it in a step-by-step, as well as the other ones who are a little too afraid to raise their hand and say, no, I don't get it. You know, and you do a really good job of, you know, okay, thumbs up if you have it, thumbs to the side, thumbs down, and I know that for the most part they're honest, but there are still some of those students who aren't being honest, and you want to target them as well. You have a whole class poll, but being intentional about the ones that you know on the NWEA historically scored lower, and after looking at the continuum and seeing the skills that they're, you know, that there's a deficit in, really pinpointing that. So using all of your data, not just the data from this specific standard that you're assessing, but all of it all together. Academic data, social emotional data, all of that together in one, and bringing it about. You're absolutely right. There was a lot going on, and you were showing, you know, that you can use all of these different assessments, and that's great. Like, we want to see those things, but maybe not all at one time, you know, so that we can definitely determine what is being assessed. Is this formative? Is this summative? So, I mean, it was great. Like, there were a bunch of different activities. They were really showing what they had learned in previous lessons, and were putting it all together, and I love seeing that. So just, you know, those quick suggestions, that's all I have for, you know, areas of growth. Having that agenda, the step-by-step already written as well. You verbalize it. Let's not forget about the visual learners. Erasing the dry erase board and or using the chart paper on the side of the board. The pre-planning of those things. Like, you have your lesson plan planned out, but then going a step further with the resources and materials, so that you can maximize instructional time and learning time.
And also make sure that it seems that a summative is a true summative.
Yeah.
And I'm not like walking them through the algorithm, basically explaining the algorithm to them and everything. Like, this is what you do, and this is what it looks like, and this is how you do this problem. This is how you do this problem. Just copy me, guys.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And we'll move forward from there.
Okay.
Awesome. Good.
Yeah.
So